it. That's what I'm talking about.
Wait! Okay, now, from the beginning.
Welcome to BS, Beyond Stereotypes, a podcast about lawyers using their authentic voices to change the world.
From my perspective, though, I got to be honest, I don't get too hung up on maybe what people may consider me or call me or call members of our community. What I think is more focused on is being less invisible and being recognized. From my perspective, you can call me whatever you want. I've been called a lot of things in my life, right? I mean, I just want to be, and I think folks in our community, in all different communities of different ethnicities, they want to really be recognized and provided with opportunities to compete, opportunities for jobs, recognition, right? So I don't get too hung up on the nomenclature. I just want to really be included.
Welcome to BS, Beyond Stereotypes. I'm your host, Merle Vaughn. Here to BS with me today is Dennis Garcia, whose story I find fascinating and who will no doubt inspire all of you to embrace your authenticity. Hey, Dennis, how you doing?
I'm doing great today, Merle, and it's great to be here. And thank you for the opportunity to speak to you and to your audience.
Absolutely. Thanks for joining us. I really appreciate it. I should say that Dennis and I met, we were both on a panel about diversity in the law. And I just was really wanting to hear more from you and learn more from you. And I thought, I have a podcast. I can invite him to be on my podcast.
Well, that's great. And I had so much fun participating on that panel. I learned from all of you, and it was just it was terrific. It was a lot of fun.
Let's back up a little bit here.
Sure.
I know you're excited, but let's find out a little bit about you. So
Sure.
what I know is that you are currently Assistant General Counsel at Microsoft. I believe you've been there for about 18 years. You attended Binghamton University, which is new to me, and received your bachelor's in poli-sci and business there before attending Columbia Law School, where you received your JD. You started out working at IBM, then moved to Accenture. And like I said before, you've been at Microsoft for 18 years. And it's my understanding that you have practiced at the intersection of law, technology, and business for over 20 years. Did I get all that right? And did I leave anything out?
No, that's you got it pretty much right. The only thing I would change is the college I went to was actually called Binghamton University. It's in upstate New York. It's about three and a half hours northwest of New York City. But that's absolutely right. And I live now in the greater Chicago area, in a suburb of Chicago called Hinsdale. Before that, I lived in Chicago for well over 20 years. So I'm a native New Yorker, but I'm also a proud Chicagoan as well.
Okay, and I was going to ask you where you were from, and I'd like to start there. I'd like to start with, how, where you're from, how you grew up, what influences were in your life to help you as a Latino person reach the heights that you have.
Sure. So I'll say a few things. Grew up in the New York City area, was born in the Bronx, but grew up in a suburb of New York City, about 20 miles north of the Bronx, called Scarsdale, which is a very nice suburb of New York City. So my grandparents originally were from the island of Puerto Rico. That they
Mm.
came to the mainland back in the 1930s and met in New York City in the Bronx and started a family. And so, and my grandmother, bless bless her, she's 101 and still lives
Wow.
in the New York City area. And I speak to her once a week and to catch up. And she provides me with a lot of inspiration, and
That's amazing.
it really is amazing. And one thing which is amazing about her, of course, being 101 years old, and she lives with my aunt and uncle, so she's not in any sort of assisted living facility. But to me, she still is the same since I was, a little boy, if you will. I mean, she's very articulate. She's very energetic. I think one of the reasons why she's lived for so long is her ability to move forward. She's
Mhm.
constantly in motion, constantly moving forward, constantly having a positive attitude in life. And I spent a lot of time with my grandparents growing up as a kid. Even though when we moved to the suburbs of New York City, we'd spent a lot of time with them in the Bronx and going back to the Bronx. And she's had a really big influence on my life in terms of my outlook on things, to try to be as positive as possible and trying to also understand the importance of rebounding and
Mhm.
moving forward when you do have setbacks. We've all had setbacks in our lives. And she's also been a very positive influence for me when it comes to my faith and working hard and excelling in education and working hard in the workforce. The same thing with one of my grandparents too. Actually, all of my grandparents, but I had my grandpa who passed away about 5 years ago. He lived to be 100 years old. So we've had
Wow.
some really good longevity in
Some
our
good
family.
genes.
Good genes so far. Hopefully we'll keep it up. But they were really big influences. All my grandparents, and I appreciate the fact that I was able to spend quality time with them growing up as a kid. But then, of course, I had big influences from my parents. Both my parents were born in New York City, in the Bronx, raised in the Bronx in New York City, and worked really hard to provide their kids, myself and my younger brother, a better way of life in terms of moving to the suburbs. And it was great growing up in Scarsdale. It's a very nice, affluent suburb, but I will say that growing up there, I was probably one of the few Latinx, kids in Scarsdale. Quite frankly, you didn't see too
Mhm.
many folks with their last names such as Garcia, Gonzalez, or Rodriguez. It was, a
Mhm.
little bit different growing up there. In hindsight, um, I'm glad my family, had the means to be able to provide me with that livelihood and growing up in the suburbs. But one thing I have learned through the years is sometimes as you're living in different areas, which may not be the same area which you were born into, which your family's from, you lose that connection, right? In terms of
Mhm.
maybe your original heritage. And some people may even say, well, yeah, Dennis, you're Hispanic, but you're really not totally or truly Hispanic, right? Because you didn't grow up, or you didn't spend, you spent some time, sure, in the New York City area, but you were growing up in the suburbs, so you're really not Hispanic. And oh, by the way, Dennis, my Spanish is so because my parents really didn't teach Spanish to us as kids growing up, because back in the day, it wasn't
Yep.
looked at as something really to do, because you really wanted to make sure that you spoke English and that you assimilated as much as possible. Some people will say to me, "Well, Dennis, you're really maybe not Hispanic because your Spanish is very so.
Wow.
It isn't that great." So I've experienced that over the years. So I say that because in some respects I have found myself um, between different sorts of identities, in my
Mhm.
culture and growing up and now, as a lawyer. So it is very interesting.
Yeah, and I well, first of all, I know your grandmother has to be very proud of you, as is your entire family, but Um, I noticed that you said Latinx, and that it was one of the questions that I wanted to ask you about. I was listening to a presentation the other day for Hispanic Heritage Month, and there was a conversation about, is it, do you prefer Latino, Latina, Latinx, Hispanic? I mean, I could go on and on. There's POC, though, there's BIPOC, there's all kinds of things. And as a Black person, I am always going on record saying that I prefer to be called Black. Um, Although I don't correct people. How and Latinx is new, right? I've even heard that now people are saying Latine. Um, what are your thoughts about all that?
It's an interesting question, right? I'm probably a little more older school, if you will. So I probably subscribe to maybe the Hispanic terminology as opposed to maybe Latino or Latinx or maybe something else. I think Hispanic, some people will say that's probably a holdover from maybe some of the census work, in our country for a long period of time. Latinx is sort of a newer, maybe sort of hipper, maybe some people will say also maybe more inclusive
Inclusive. Hmm.
perspective of our Hispanic slash Latinx slash Latino community, which of course is also extremely diverse. And I think that's one of the cool things about being Hispanic, Latinx, or Latino, whatever we call our community of folks. From my perspective, though, I got to be honest, I don't get too hung up on maybe what people may consider me or call members of our community. What I think is more focused on is being less invisible and being
Hmm.
recognized.
Yep.
From my perspective, you can call me whatever you want. I've been called a
Just
lot of things,
call me, right?
right? I mean, I just want to be, and I think folks in our community, in all different communities of different ethnicities, they want to really be recognized and provided with opportunities to compete, opportunities for jobs, recognition, right? So I don't get too hung up on the nomenclature. I just want to
Mhm.
really be included.
I hear you. I absolutely, somebody said the other day, I don't care which one you call me, just call me. Right?
Just call me, just provide me with an opportunity, allow me to have my voice be heard, basically, right?
Right.
And that's really what we want at the end of the day.
And so at Microsoft for 18 years, how has it been? Have you felt included the entire time? Have things changed over time? You've obviously been able to be to have opportunities and move up. How do you feel you were able to do that?
Sure, a few thoughts, and actually, it'll be 19 years in 2 months. I can't believe I've been at Microsoft for 19 years, but that's incredible. I feel very fortunate to be a long Microsoft employee. And I'm biased on this too, to what I think is the greatest legal department on the planet. I mean, but to answer your question, I have felt very included over the years. Now, that said, I have sort of a unique role in that I have always been in the Chicago area
Mhm.
supporting our Microsoft US field sales, marketing, and services team. So I have never worked in our corporate headquarters in Redmond, Washington, although, of course, I've traveled there a lot over the years. So I've been in this sort of a field base role. And when I look at my team and the team which my manager leads, or North America Microsoft legal team, it's been a very diverse team for a long period of time, which I know we've been very proud of. So I feel like my our immediate team has been highly diverse and inclusive for a long period of time. I think the Microsoft legal department, when you look at it all up, when I started almost 19 years ago, certainly wasn't as diverse as it is now. It's made a lot of really great strides in advancements in becoming more diverse and more inclusive. And the credit, of course, is really to our Microsoft president and vice chair Brad Smith,
Yep.
who's been in that role now for a long time, for about 20 plus years. And him and his senior leadership team have made it a very, very big point that our legal team needs to be more diverse and inclusive. And statistics have shown over a period of time that has happened. So I do really feel that my voice is being heard, that we are an inclusive team. That said, you could always make some improvements, right? I mean, you're never
Right.
going to be in a situation where I think it's perfect, but I do believe since I've worked at Microsoft, I've had managers and managers of managers and our senior leaders who've been very accessible to me, and I've always been interested in my perspective and my opinion, and also our colleagues' opinions on a variety of different matters, including how do we advance more diversity and inclusion.
Right. Microsoft clearly, as you stated, has been at the forefront of insisting that their outside lawyers uh, pay attention to diversity on their teams. I remember that Microsoft was one of the first companies to provide both carrots and sticks with respect to their outside counsel. What are you guys doing these days?
Well, yeah, several years ago, Brad and the SLT put together a very unique program where we provide financial benefits and incentives to our large preferred provider law firms if they meet certain key metrics in advancing diversity and inclusion. And those metrics, I think, have evolved over a period of time. But we've had some information which we've shared to the public regarding how our preferred partners are moving forward with their diversity and inclusion initiative. So we definitely provide financial benefits to our preferred partners if they invest more in inclusion and diversity and based upon key diversity and inclusion metrics. We've also have hired over the years, in addition to our preferred provider firms, a mosaic of law firms, small law firms, minority and women owned law firms. I know we've been very active in NAMWOLF and other legal industry diversity affinity groups. We've been very active with the Hispanic National Bar Association, the National Bar Association, the National Association of Women Lawyers, NAPABA. I mean, we can go on and on. I know my colleagues are very actively in all of those affinity groups. Many of them have taken on leadership roles in those affinity groups. We've sponsored those affinity groups. And I know, at least pre-COVID, when we had in-person meetings, we would have a number of Microsoft lawyers and legal professionals attend their events and participate in panels and other initiatives. And we've also have been able to hire great lawyers from the law firms that we have used in the past as well. And that's been sort of a way for us to accelerate our pipeline of more
Hmm.
diverse and inclusive of lawyers. I know that when my team and I, we use outside counsel a fair amount, we're requiring more and more that we want to make sure that the lawyers who are doing our work are from a diverse orientation, basically. And we've been very, very clear to our firms that that's something which we expect. And from our perspective, it's not just really the quote unquote right thing to do, but it makes so much business sense, right? I mean,
Hmm.
there's been studies which show time and time again that teams which are more diverse and inclusive outperform teams which are less diverse and inclusive. And of course, when you look at Microsoft customers, we have a broad array of customers out there, and we need to make sure that we're serving them appropriately. So it's important that when we're designing our products, that we have a diverse team of engineers, that when we're selling our products, we have a diverse team of sellers, when we're creating contracts and figuring out our legal practices, that we have a diverse team of lawyers who are helping us, right? So it's really more than anything else, a real important business imperative. And so I really, I remain excited in the work which we've done on diversity and inclusion with our outside counsel partners and also within the Microsoft legal department. And what's interesting about my role, like a lot of Microsoft lawyers, we view ourselves as ambassadors of our company, and I'll connect very often with lawyers at our customers and partners, and they're always asking me for thoughts on, well, what does Microsoft do in this area of diversity and
Hmm.
inclusion? What are you doing with regard to having affinity groups or employee resource groups within the Microsoft legal department? How are you thinking about these sorts of issues, right? And so, what I love about the role too is I feel that people look at and lawyers look at Microsoft as being one of the marketplace leaders, and they're asking for our help in counsel and thoughts. And so we engage in that knowledge sharing, and of course, by doing that, we're also learning a lot from them, and also building closer relationships with our customers and partners and the legal and compliance decision makers who work for them.
So thanks for that. And I will tell you that I am a huge Microsoft. I bought Microsoft stock, geez, probably 25 years ago. Um, and it's been very, very good to me. I'm one of those people who buys stock and holds it. Um, and at the time that I bought the Microsoft stock, my husband and I had a business where we did uh, sound systems and surveillance systems. And Microsoft was one of our customers. And we had to go up to Washington and install a bunch of systems. And we were so impressed with how Microsoft did business, and how fair they were, and all of that compared to a lot of our other customers, that I actually bought stock, and I've held it all that time, and it's been very good to me. So keep doing everything you're doing, because I own stock. Uh,
Well,
um,
thank you for that. Thanks for being a great customer and a great Microsoft shareholder. And of course, over the last 7 or 8 years, especially since Satya Nadella has been CEO, it's amazing what we've done, and under his leadership and the senior leadership team. And so that's great to hear. Thank you for sharing.
about 4 months ago, you started a series called #3 Strikes. And it's a series of videos where you give in-house lawyers your take on three things that are words of wisdom, or things, takeaways, maybe from your career, from your experience. How did that come about?
Yeah, no, I love doing that. Thanks for mentioning that. And so that came about, I want to say 6 or 7 months ago, where I wanted to try to do something different in terms of my content and to come across in a way on video. I mean, I think one thing which we're learning more and more through social media is that if you could do a quick sort of hit video, if you will, people are more maybe willing to watch that, especially if the content is interesting. So I figured, let me try something a little bit different. I've experimented in the past on videos, but now I've been trying to do it more consistently, maybe once a month, where I'll put a video out on a particular subject. And I use the moniker 3 Strikes because I'm a big baseball fan. And of course, yeah, if you're a pitcher, you're trying to throw strikes. So that's how I use the name 3 Strikes. But I try to come up with a video which is no longer than 3 to 4 minutes, where I share some perspective, 3 best practices on a particular topical area. And there's been a few times where I've had my dog in the video, our little dog Coco. There's been times I've done it outside. I've done it in our house. Sometimes I'll wear some baseball apparel or a hat or something. I try to make it interesting and fun. But what I'm trying to do basically is just share some learnings which I've had over the years of being an in-house lawyer. I've had the privilege of always being in-house for my entire career. I've learned a lot. I've been able to learn from some terrific lawyers and senior business leaders. And what I'm trying to do is just to provide some basic practical guidance in certain areas. I see a lot of content out there which which may sound good, but it may still be very theoretical in nature. So I'm trying to give some content to maybe some of the younger lawyers out there, or maybe folks who are starting in-house counsel practice from somebody who's got some experience in this space. But it reminds me I need to do one. I haven't done one now in about 3 or 4 weeks, and I gotta do it. I get these ideas when I go out for my daily runs or walks. I'll come up with some ideas on a particular topic. And what I also found too is that doing some of these short videos, it's not easy. It takes some work. I go through, some takes, if you will, and I gotta, sort of practice what I'm going to say, obviously. And then, you're in front of your computer when I'm taping it, so I have to make sure I've got the appropriate eye contact and everything. My point being is, I think doing some of these videos has helped me become, hopefully, a more effective and succinct communicator, because so much of what we do as in-house lawyers with our business clients is that we need to be very brief, we need to be very crisp, and we need to be very targeted and thoughtful in our advice.
Well, one of the ones I watched a couple of them, but the one that I thought um, really resonated was the one about Anthony Rizzo's trade from the Cubs to the Yankees. And your three strikes were uh, you said you have to have range, you have to be helpful to your teammates, and you have to embrace change. And the quote that I wrote down, which I really loved, was change is the only constant in our personal and professional lives.
Well, thank you. And I remember when Rizzo was traded, and I felt bad. I'm a Yankees fan, so I was very happy that he was traded to the Yankees, of course, because they needed an excellent first baseman. But I also felt bad for a lot of friends of mine who were Chicago Cubs fans, and Rizzo, is beloved here in Chicago, and they traded a number of their players. But yeah, I know it is a cliche expression about change is the only constant, or the only constant is change, but I'll tell you, that's one thing which I've learned, not just in the workplace and at Microsoft, but also just in our lives, right? I mean, it's, as we all know, it's tough to evolve and change. But we're going to go through ups and downs and different experiences in life. And I think the best, if you look at the best lawyers, the best entertainers, the best sports figures, the best of the best, they're constantly adapting and changing, right? They really are. And the ones who um, uh, are on the top for a long period of time, I mean, I think they have to constantly be able to change and adapt. And so, as I've gotten more mature and older, I've been trying to be better at embracing change as much as I can, and being a better friend, being a better lawyer, being a better husband, being a better dad, right? And all of that, it takes work, right? And
Well,
so,
well, and also, I mean, when you talk about change like that, I think about your 101-year-old grandmother and how much change she's seen throughout her life, and the kinds of things that she probably never could have imagined. I remember when my father was 90, I think it was when Obama, he got to vote, for Obama. And I took him to the polling place, and he could barely see, but he knew what he was doing, and he got to vote. I mean, the idea to have lived long enough to see that and go through the things that they've gone through, that's really experiencing change.
Oh, there's no doubt, and it's really hard for me. I cannot be empathetic to what my grandmother has seen over such a long period of time. I mean, she came to the mainland from Puerto Rico as a very young girl, and she lived through the Depression, obviously World War II. Her son, my dad, went to the Vietnam War and served there for a period of time. I mean, she's seen, of course, recessions, the Great Recession. She's seen, COVID-19. I mean, so many things she has
September
seen.
11th.
September 11th, absolutely, especially being in the New York City area, absolutely. And I remember, but it was sort of interesting that one thing about her too is that she's incredibly fearless. There were some folks have maybe been a little concerned, at least initially, when the vaccine came out first, but she couldn't wait to get the vaccine, right?
Right.
She was
Because she's been through so much,
She's been
right?
through so much, and she knew that this is gonna, help us and help her to continue to move forward and live. And she had seen so much for such a long period of time. She lost her husband, she lost her son. I mean, she's obviously, ups and downs, during her life that she wasn't afraid. She's not afraid of anything, right? And in many respects, that's why I love speaking to her once a week, because when I speak to her, her voice is so clear and energetic, and she's sort of pumping me up. I mean, she's got more energy than I do, than
Right.
much more energy than my 10-year-old son. And I just be able to speak to her sort of makes me feel better and positive, and yeah, it's just truly amazing. She's really a force of nature.
I love that. And speaking of the pandemic and COVID, I know that the Black community and the Hispanic community have been hit particularly hard. Culturally, you know, what do you have you thought about what we need to be doing to help our communities?
Well, I think I think it's in some respects continue to maybe to communicate and maybe quite frankly over communicating the good benefits of having the vaccine, and showing depicting the data, the benefits associated with getting it, and how it's going to put you in a better position. I think my own view is I think we probably need to communicate even more to folks about this. And I think we also, quite frankly, is my own opinion, is that I think there's an opportunity for people who are more opportunity for people who are viewed as role models in our communities to be even more open and touting the importance of getting this vaccine. I think there's an opportunity for business leaders, for athletes, for other people in our communities who we look up to be even more clear and more active in talking about the why we all need to get vaccinated. So I think there's some opportunities there, but my view is we gotta. It's a little bit like when I connect with my business clients. I feel like I've got to over communicate to them. I got to tell them that maybe the same thing, maybe in different ways, or ways in which it may be able to be. May land with them, and we may have to adjust our communication style a little bit so that maybe there's a greater likelihood that the messaging and the positive messaging of the vaccine will get through to them. So,
Well, thank you for that. I know it's a little off the subject, but we are just BSing here. So speaking of stereotypes, what stereotypes do you feel like you've had to overcome, endure and overcome, and why? Or what stereotypes do you feel like people may have about you that are either right or wrong?
oh well, I think earlier on in my career, I definitely wasn't as maybe proactive in maybe managing my career in terms of the progression of my career as I probably should have had. I think I was a little bit late to realizing the importance of building relationships with more senior people in the companies I've worked for, a little bit more laid back, maybe a view of being a little more hands off and laissez faire, if you will. And I think by by maybe being that, I think maybe some folks might have thought that, hey, maybe Dennis isn't so interested in what he's doing, or maybe not interested in becoming more senior in our company. There could be a perception which is created, whether it's right or wrong. That's probably come up on occasion. I think when I look back in my career too, and this shows how we evolve and change. Earlier in my career, as an example, I was not a fan of public speaking and giving presentations in front of a live audience. It was something which, quite frankly, I avoided doing whenever I could avoid it. I just didn't have that confidence, or I was fearful in doing that. And I think for a period of time, that might have held me back in terms of not being a very crisp or clear communicator in a sort of a public setting and audience. I think that held me back, while my colleagues were more highly proficient in that area. And what I learned from my father, I remember it was like 12 or 13 years ago. I remember speaking to him about the fact that I wanted to advance further in my career, and I was like, Dad, what more should I do?
Uh-huh.
And he was clear with me that, Dennis, you have to go above and beyond, right? You just can't do your quote unquote day job, okay, and do that very well and expect to have more opportunities, whether it's at your company or somewhere else. You got to do more. So he encouraged me to think about starting to write articles on certain topics in the legal profession. So I started doing that. I started becoming more active on social media. And then once that happened, people were asking me to maybe give presentations and to speak publicly. And although I was still a little fearful in doing that, I realized that by getting that practice and presenting once or twice or 3 or 4 times a month in front of a public audience, you get better at it, right? I mean, I'm not President Obama, I'm not President Clinton, I'm not Brad Smith, I'm not the best orator or speaker in the world, but I think it's sort of a learned skill where you could become a more proficient communicator with practice, practice, practice. And a lot of it is also based upon repetitions and confidence. And then I changed, and I realized that I needed to grow some additional skill sets, basically. And I think I've done a much better job at working on those sort of skills, what people will say maybe are the softer skills, if you will.
Right. So yeah, and we're about out of time here, and I want to give you an opportunity to end with some words of wisdom, words of advice, particularly to young folks, hopefully to young Latinx folks, and also to potential employers of those folks, about that would be helpful for them in owning who they are, and being authentic, and being successful.
Well, I will say to potential employers is that, and I guess one point I would say is, once you've brought in some great talent, take the time to really nurture and invest in that talent. And I guess what I mean by that is, I think sometimes, unfortunately, people in the Latinx, Black, African American, maybe Asian American, and other ethnicities in those communities, sometimes they haven't received the proper feedback, if you will, about themselves of being a lawyer, areas in which they can grow, areas in which they can improve, and areas in which they develop. I think naturally we may have this sort of unconscious bias that we feel comfortable in sharing feedback to people who may look like us, who sound like us, who remind us of us, basically. But then sometimes we're less inclined to provide feedback or coaching to people who may not be like us, quote unquote, right? And I guess one thing I would say is, don't be shy in giving feedback to people, so that you're investing hopefully in their success, right? And you're helping them. And when you give that feedback, do it in a way where it's not really tearing someone down, but you're trying to help them, you're trying to support them, right? And so work hard in developing that psychological safety, with your teammates. It's a phrase which I know Amy Edmondson, who's I believe a professor at Harvard Business School, came up with a few years ago when she wrote a book called The Fearless Organization. But I think employers, workers, lawyers, we with our teams, we need to develop more psychological safety with our teammates. We got to earn their trust, and we got to work on a trusting relationship. In terms of advice I would give to, a young Latinx lawyer, I would just say a few things. I mean, number one is be fearless, be confident and fearless. Really believe in yourself and your skills, right? Don't let anyone sort of, push you around, be bold, if you will. Be yourself, be bold, be fearless. But also, you got to really be open to change and to trying things out, right? Be open to trying to do different things. Think about stretch assignments, or maybe working in different areas of the law which you haven't worked in before, right? I mean, think about other opportunities. Think about, how do you make yourself more marketable? How do you work on your brand? Because at the end of the day, the reality is we're all brands, right? And we have to sort of build that brand. And what do you want that brand of Dennis Garcia or Merle Vaughn to be? You have to really think about that. And you got to be open to, I think, changing and evolving that brand over a period of time.
Words to live by, my friend. Words to live by. I am so glad that you agreed to be here, Dennis, to BS with me today. It's been an honor to spend this time with you, and I hope you had a little fun too.
I had a great time, Merle. I thank you for thinking about me for this opportunity.
Absolutely. And thanks to everyone for listening. Until the next episode, remember that everybody is different, and different is good.
Hit it! That's what I'm talking about.
Wait! Okay, now, from the beginning.
We hope you enjoyed the stories shared in today's episode of BS, Beyond Stereotypes. Join us next time when another authentic personality unleashes their uniqueness on the world.